I think my number one DM right now is like, when are you going to be sharing about your freezer stash? Okay, I'm aware that this is not ideal lighting or an ideal setup, but I have a 4-week-old sleeping on my lap. This is what we're working with. Maybe if I go this way just a little bit. Okay, so about 5 years ago, I was a mom of one and I was struggling big time to just make meal times work. It seemed like an absolutely unattainable task. And then I had 3 more children over the next 4 years. And basically I was forced to sort of figure it out. Key to meal times and cooking and eating with 4 small children without losing my ever-loving mind was bulk meal prep. Over the past 2 years, I've really learned a lot about how to bulk prep and bulk store food to save myself time in the kitchen, make meal times at least a little less crazy as it can be with 4 small children. I want to share a lot of my favorite meals, what are my favorite things to put in the freezer, how I make time to like stock up my freezer, my favorite tips, tricks, tools, and all of it. We're gonna start with freezer prep and freezer storage. So first up, I just got a basement freezer this summer. It was like the number one thing that I wanted before my 4th baby arrived. Like I wasn't looking at baby equipment. I was like, I need a freezer. But I've been stashing stuff in my freezer and sort of learning about how to bulk prep food for the last 2 years or so. And I've just been using the normal freezer inside of my fridge. So you definitely do not need to have a basement or a garage freezer to get started doing this. Now, obviously I stock it with a lot of my favorite freezer meals, and I will have a link in the description box down below that will take you to a post on my website with like all of my favorite freezer meals. But I'm actually not just doing meals. I feel like when I first started doing freezer prep and like bulk prepping foods, I thought it was all about just having freezer dinners ready. But I've actually found one of the most helpful things to do is more like single ingredients or like bulk items that I might need for meals and not fully completed meals. So we're talking about like some of your kitchen and cooking essentials. So these are things like shredded chicken, chopped veggies, broths, chicken cutlets, pizza doughs, sauces, cooked veggies. These are basically essentials that you can have prepped to cut time significantly when you want to pull together a quick dinner. So you want to think about the things that you cook and eat a lot in your house. This is going to vary for everybody. What my essentials are wouldn't necessarily be your essentials. What are the things that you find that you're cooking a lot, that you're having to prep a lot? And then you're just going to bulk do that and freeze some so that you have it ready. So some examples I always bulk cook is rice. I find rice like such an annoying thing to cook when I have to have a dinner that includes rice, because I just feel like, I don't know, it takes like 25 minutes and then sometimes I forget to cook the rice. If I'm gonna cook rice, I cook a big old pot of it and then I'm going to freeze it. And my favorite trick with a lot of foods like rices or pureed vegetables is you're gonna put it flat into a freezer bag and then you can just sort of scour it with your hand to create sections. This way, once it's frozen, you can just crack off sections and you have like a single serving of rice when you need it, and you don't have to go boiling another pot and making up a bunch of rice. Say there's sauces that you eat a lot or you make a lot, like marinaras, or I use a lot of chicken broth. And of course, I do also make freezer dinners. Personally, my favorite things are Crockpot dump meals. These are exactly what they sound like. You dump everything into a freezer bag, you freeze it, and then when you're ready, you just defrost it, toss it in your slow cooker, and you are done. These are perfect for busy nights. I typically do 1 dump Crockpot meal a week, somewhere in the middle of the week, because it just makes it easy for me to have like a really super easy meal that I don't even have to think about. Again, links in the description, but a few of my go-tos are chili, green chicken chili, taco bowls, various stews, lots of different soups. And basically what I do is when I make these, I will sort of like quadruple the recipe and I will freeze up like 4 of them. So I can put 1 in the crock pot now, and then I have 3 or 4 that are ready for me in the freezer down the road. Now let's talk about freezer meals for kids as well. This is sort of what I dipped into in like my 2nd year of bulk meal prep, when I realized, wait, I can meal prep a ton of stuff for my kids. I mean, these kids are just eating all of the time. It allows me to maybe make something that's a little bit more healthy and homemade, but I'm not being a short order cook every single night. And I also do this for lunch boxes as well. So I like making mini sandwiches. Sandwiches freeze really well. Muffins or pastas and meatballs that I could pull out and put in the kids' thermoses. I always have freezer stash of Uncrustable peanut butter and jellies for my kids, and you can freeze a lot more things than you would think that you can freeze. If you're ever unsure, I will literally Google like, can I freeze whatever, and it will tell me if I can freeze it. Okay, so when it comes to actually stocking up my freezer, I feel like when I originally shared the clip of my freezer, this is what got everyone like so excited, like, holy guacamole, how did you prep so many meals? I feel like we've seen these videos where it's like, make 30 meals with me in one afternoon. I don't have an afternoon to just make 30 meals, but I was still able to very successfully fill up my freezer, and I'm able to successfully keep my freezer quite well stocked by using some of these tips and tricks. Now, first up, whenever you cook something that is something you eat a lot and that's something that you can freeze, go ahead and double it or triple it or quadruple it. If you are taking the time to chop up the vegetables for that, to open the recipe, to follow the steps, if it is something that then can be frozen, do it. And this goes again for not just full meals. Like if I'm making lasagna on a Sunday, I'm gonna make a couple of them and stick them in the freezer. But this goes for like just prepping foods as well. If I'm gonna cook up a bunch of chicken and then I'm gonna pull out my KitchenAid to shred it, you better believe I'm gonna be freezing some of that, because that's a big pain in the butt to pull out the whole KitchenAid to do that. If I'm going to cook up a bunch of sweet potatoes and then puree it, because I like to mix this into like my kids' mac and cheese, you better believe I'm going to be cooking up a bunch of it and then freezing it, so I don't need to be doing this every single time. So it's really not about taking these big chunks of time or having an entire day where I'm filling up my entire freezer. It's just if I'm already cooking something, I'm gonna cook a little bit more of it so then I can freeze it. And that is how I really successfully sort of stash up my freezer and then keep my freezer pretty well stocked as well. It's basically about like cooking one to eat now and cooking one to eat later. And as you get into the habit of it, you'll find that you'll just sort of do it almost habitually, that you'll sort of extra cook things so that you can stock your freezer with it later. Okay, let's move on to some supplies that I really like. I think when it comes to prepping freezer things, definitely having some of the right tools and supplies can make it a lot easier. I don't think that you need to have all of the right tools and supplies to get started. You can definitely start with what you have, but I want to share some of the best ones that I have found that I like using the most over the last few years. First are these dishwasher microwavable safe plastic containers. They come in a variety of sizes and they are just really easy to pre-portion meals. You can also wash and reuse them. And it just makes going from cooked to freezer very, very easy. There's no like extra steps involved. I always have these handy, and I especially like them to portion out single serving. So if I'm gonna make a soup for dinner, I will double the recipe and then I will portion out maybe 3 or 4 for the freezer, which just makes like an easy lunch or dinner for my husband or I down the road. For Crockpot meal dump and goes, I use freezer bags. I'm in the process of moving over to reusable bags. So I've been testing out a few different reusable freezer bags. If you have a certain brand that you really like, let me know in the description box down below. But like I said, you start with what you have. Really good reusable freezer bags aren't super cheap. You know, so I started with just regular freezer bags that you can get at the grocery store. I also love these bag holders. This holds open any sort of like plastic bag so you can fill it up, especially great for your dump and go crock pot and sheet pan meals. Another product that I really love are super cubes. These are perfect for portioning out soups, sauces, or even individual meals and stews. You can freeze the food into pre-portioned cubes and then store them in a larger bag or container. These are really great for single servings of broths that you want in pre-portion sizes. Okay, a few more quick tips to success when it comes to freezer prep. First, always label everything. Trust me, you are not going to remember like you think you're going to. I always include the date and often cooking instructions so I don't have to look it up later. It just makes the whole process of having a freezer meal easier when all the information's right there. Second, freeze things flat when possible so that storing and stacking them are easier. Lots of times I will prep food and then I freeze it in my normal freezer because I can lay it flat, and then I take it down to our basement freezer and I can sort of stack it up that way. And finally, again, don't forget that you can freeze more things than you think. So again, you can always just Google if something can be frozen. Okay, so like I said, basically this is how I stocked up my freezer, and I keep my freezer pretty well stocked without having to take like a copious amount of times to do it. I'm basically just sort of doing it as I am already cooking, and you can use that same mentality just for prepping food, even just for the week, even if you're not somebody who wants to have a huge stash in your freezer. So an example here that I always share a lot is I prep my kids' lunch boxes sometimes 2 to 5 days in advance. Lots of things store well in the fridge longer than you think that it will. If I'm going to wash and cut up vegetables, put in their lunchbox, I'm going to just do it for the week. So whenever I'm sort of prepping one thing, if I'm already taking that food out, I'm already getting out the cutting board or whatever utensils I'm gonna need to wash and cut and prep it, I say, can I do more of this to save myself time down the road, even if it's just 2 or 3 days from now, even if it's not going into the freezer. And like I said, a lot of things store in the fridge longer than you think that it will. So peanut butter and jellies, other sandwich roll-ups. I like to make snack box lunches for my kids. So this would be like some meat, some cubed cheese, some crackers, some raisins. That will stay fine in the fridge for many, many days. So you could easily prep an entire week of your kids' lunch boxes on one day and be done for the entire week. And I do the same with dinner. So say I'm making like salad dressing for dinner, I'm gonna go ahead and make extra because now I have homemade salad dressing that I can use for my lunches. If I'm cooking up pasta, I might cook a little extra for another meal down the road or to use in my kids' lunch boxes. While I'm always cooking food and always sort of thinking, okay, can I make more of this for it to go in the freezer? I'm also always thinking like 2 to 4 days ahead. If I'm cooking something now that I'm going to eat in the next week, can I just cook it all now and prep it all now? And that way I don't have to like make my kitchen dirty twice or take the extra time to do something twice. And again, once you really start doing this, it just sort of becomes a habit. The more you sort of find that you can sort of double something or do something a little bit more now and save yourself time down the road, you'll find that you just sort of start to do it habitually. So I hope that this sort of helped you guys out and it gives you a little insight into how I stocked my freezer, some of my favorite things to stock my freezer with, and how I really use my freezer super successfully. Obviously my freezer was a little extra prepped because I was like getting ready for newborn life, but even if you have just a small fraction of what I did, it just makes mealtime so much easier and it just saves you time. Again, at the end of the day, what it really comes down to for me is like, if I'm gonna cook something once, why would I cook it 2 or 3 times if I can just do it once now and then I'm done with it. As always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it helped you out, inspired you to do a little bit of meal prepping or freezer prepping or whatever it is. Remember to be kind to yourself and others, and I will see you all in my next video.